Accident victims like you deserve better. A husband and wife were rear-ended, and insurance offered them $10,000. We litigated the case and got them $375,000. Qualified expert attorneys can get you more. Call Zirkin and Smerling today.
Good evening, Baltimore. How you doing this evening? My name is Desmond Stenning, host of City Voters Live podcast, and back in studio once again with our wonderful co-host, Lauren Brown. How you doing this evening?
I'm doing all right. Staying warm. Trying
to stay warm. Yeah, it's good. I've been pretty brisk out and got more weather coming our way tomorrow.
Is it tomorrow night?
Yeah, it sounds like it. So, be prepared. So, but this, this point in time and our electoral cycle is getting pretty interesting. And, so what have you been following this week?
Well, I have followed how much money the major candidates have raised. So.
All right. We had fundraising deadline. Yeah, that was yesterday.
The reporting deadline was yesterday was Wednesday.
Was Wednesday.
Can't keep track of the days.
17. Yeah. So what do we got so far?
Well, for mayor, Brandon Scott has about 836,000 cash on hand. Sheila Dixon has about 370,000, but she also has more in a super PAC. And Bob Wallace has about 250,000, but most of that he loaned himself.
Got it. So his came from mostly loans, not a whole lot from outside from donors. And so that's the cash on hand. And I think I read somewhere where the raises were a little bit closer. I think Dixon had raised about 520 and the mayor had raised about 680 in this cycle.
That sounds right. I don't have that. Oh, yes.
Got it.
I am looking at that now.
Got it.
Thanks to David Pontius's Baltimore Bulletin.
The Baltimore Bulletin, yeah.
That's where I get all my information.
Yeah, guys, chock full of information, and that's great. We'll take a deeper dive. CVL will take a deeper dive into the numbers and see what's going on. But a lot of times you don't just look at how much each candidate is raised, but also the people that are supporting them and what they've raised. So it'll be interesting to see what the allies war chest looks like as well. And but that's gonna be a whole other episode for us to cover the finance reports and dig down into who's behind who and who's straddling the fence, right? So it's good times. Yesterday we did a short on the first week of legislative session. Sound like it's pretty quiet down there. Everybody's working on their independent bills and getting ready for their bill filing deadline. And but we had some pretty big news in the media world, huh?
Yes, we did.
Yeah. Baltimore Sun finally got out of the hands of the private equity firm that's been holding it for some time, and been getting close to sales on a couple of occasions. I think the banner owner Stuart Batum had at one point expressed some interest in acquiring the Sun from that private equity group, and but the price tag was a little too much for what he wanted to invest, and found it cheaper and more cost effective for him to go and start his own internet paper. So kind of left the Sun hanging there, and it got snatched up.
Yep.
So
sure did.
Yeah, it sounds like we're going to get some changes there, but we'll maybe cover the that whole situation in another episode.
In a contentious episode wherein the co-hosts disagree.
I think it's a great thing. Unfortunately, it was left out there, and someone that's a Baltimorean saw value in it and grabbed it up. We'll see what he does with it.
No, we should definitely have a show on that because that would be fun. I'd enjoy that.
Absolutely. But tonight
we're talking about a slightly less contentious topic. Well,
depends
on who you talk to.
This one's way more contentious.
Yeah, I know.
For me.
I don't mean to.
Yeah.
Not. Yes. less contentious between it on this at this desk. Yeah.
I have no contention either way on either one of them. I feel the way I feel, and I stand behind that. But but I tell you, this abundant housing bill we're going to cover tonight is a pretty interesting bill, huh?
It is.
Yeah. Well, I haven't had a chance to really, dive into the details of the bill, but tonight we have a couple of guests that are going to take us through it and have spent a lot more time dissecting it. This is a bill that's in our Baltimore City Council right now, called the Abundant Housing Bill. And our guests tonight, Mr. Jody Landers and Miss Tanisha Jones, have spent a lot more time. Hello, how are you this evening?
Doing great.
Hi, thank you.
Thanks for having us.
No, it's our pleasure to do so. When there's legislation that's before our city council, and we think it's of interest to the voters in the city of Baltimore, we're always glad to host and take a deep dive into it and see what the merits of the legislation is. So if you guys want to take a minute, Jody, maybe go and maybe introduce yourself to the folks who might not know you, and brief background, and let them know what your role is as far as advocating for or against this bill.
Sure, will do. Well, Jody Landers, I'm actually a lifelong resident of Baltimore City. I live in the Lauraville, Hamilton area, which is where I grew up. I have been very involved in community activities for many years. I served as the executive director of the Harbell Community Organization. And then I spent 2 terms on the Baltimore City Council. I also worked in the council president's office as a fiscal advisor under Lawrence Bell. And then I went on to run the Greater Baltimore Board of Realtors. I was the executive officer for the Greater Baltimore Board for 15 years. And I've been a licensed real estate agent for about 35 years. So I've been very active in the real estate industry and in community work and community advocacy.
Got it. So, Lauraville, now have you spent the entirety of your Baltimore years in that East Baltimore area?
I'm literally 4 blocks away from where I grew up and went to grade school. Yes.
Wow. Yeah, that's some roots here. And Ms. Jones, so everybody wants to hear a little bit about you and your background as well.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Tanisha Jones. I'm a resident of Moravia Walther, which is right across the street from Lauraville. I am not a native of Baltimore. I'm actually from enemy territory in Pittsburgh, so thank you for welcoming me. I have always worked in affordable housing. And in addition, I was a licensed attorney for some time period as well. Thank you.
Excellent. All right. Well, as a fellow transplant, I can't really hold too much against you for being a Steelers fan and from that area. But I'd be interested to know how you and Jody are getting along. But either way, so tell us what you know about this bill and what everybody in the city should know about it.
Jody,
well, I think one thing, Tanisha and I really didn't know each other until we got acquainted over this bill. We both took an interest in it from our kind of unique perspectives about and concern about what this bill might mean. Tanisha's relatively new. She's been here several years, a homeowner in Baltimore City, and has taken an interest in this because of the potential impact it could have on homeownership in the neighborhoods we live in. So yeah, we've come together on this and coalesced and become friends over this bill. So at least it's accomplished something positive, I guess you might say.
Right.
But the bill itself, just in a nutshell, for 50 years, it's basically been a city policy under the zoning code to make it difficult to convert single-family dwellings to multi-family dwellings. You can build multi-family units, but the idea was to make it difficult under the zoning code to convert existing single-family dwellings to multifamily dwellings for two reasons. One is to help to keep densities down in neighborhoods so that neighborhoods don't become overly dense. And secondly, to help preserve home ownership opportunities for home buyers in Baltimore City. And
Right.
one of the things that Baltimore has going for it and has remained attractive to home buyers is because we have relatively affordable housing. And we have neighborhoods like Northeast Baltimore and Northwest Baltimore and Southwest Baltimore that offer home ownership opportunities to people.
Right, and I'm assuming when those kind of the planning and the design of the neighborhoods, they probably had already accounted for having X amount of single family homes and X amount of multifamily dwellings and things like that, and taking single families and chopping them up into apartments would probably throw off the balance that was intended for the neighborhood. It sounds like to me.
Absolutely. Do you want to comment on that, Tanisha? Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's important to note that, those who are I've heard from some who are in favor of the Abundant Housing Act that, community balance and things like that, it's a dog whistle. But, coming to you and speaking to you, it's important that we take in consideration of what we want, that's internal as well as to what we want our communities to look like. And the great thing about, and one of the great reasons I came and lived in Moravia Walter is because of the diversity of the community. And, I was pleasantly surprised by that. And I think I would like to have still a voice in my community as to its future and, its makeup and its offerings as well, its amenities. And I think that this Abundant Housing Act, first of all, the term abundant, it's not necessarily going back to the days of 900,000 people in Baltimore City. It is really just to, in certain communities where the housing stock is over a certain amount of square footage, allowing homeowners or investors or whoever owns that particular property to convert a single family home into multiple units, into multiple apartments within that single family home, and going as high as potentially 5 apartments or units within that single family home, depending on the square footage. Now, this does not impact, I want to get this out here early on because I tend to always forget this. It does not impact neighborhoods with covenants such as Guilford and Roland Parks that would not allow, per their covenants, this type of single family to multi-family conversion as well.
Oh, so certain neighborhoods would be excluded from this bill. So if you live in Roland Park, and you live in a single family home, and you're in the neighboring your neighboring residence is also a single family home, this would not allow for that neighboring house to be bought by a speculator and then divided up into 4 or 5 or so apartments. That would not happen in Roland Park.
No, it would not. Or even if, say, some grandparents were living in their home and wanted to convert, say, because this has been tossed out quite a bit by the bill's sponsor, convert their home into, say, 2 or 3 apartments and allow their children and grandchildren to come live with them. It would not allow for that as well.
Okay, so the existing whatever it is, R1C or whatever, would persist in those areas where there's covenants. Wow. So what do you expect the impact of a bill? Should it be passed? The impact of the bill, and where would it have the most impact?
Well, it would have the most impact in the neighborhoods that aren't protected by private covenants. Mm-hmm. So they would, like Northeast Baltimore, there's Southwest, Northwest Baltimore, areas that have larger homes. And by the way, the threshold under this bill is 1,500 square feet. So essentially, it would allow, as a matter of right, anyone who owned a home of 1,500 square feet or more to convert to multifamily. And there are different levels of multifamily. So a 2,500 square foot home, for example, would be allowed to have up to 3 or 4 units under this bill if it were to pass. There's also a carve out in it that says if a property is within 750 feet of a transit line, not only could they get an additional unit, but they could get a bonus unit. So if you had a house that qualified for 2 units or 3 units under this bill, if you were within 750 feet of a transit line, you could get a bonus unit. So it further increases densities. I think one of the real concerns that we have is what does this do to home ownership opportunities? It's called the Abundant Housing Bill, but I like to call it the investors bonanza bill, because it really would open up these areas to speculators coming in. And there have been a lot of cities around the country that have seen a lot of real estate investment companies just come in and begin buying homes for the purpose of converting them.
Right.
And these companies as well have found single family homes to be quite profitable too.
Well, if you have the ability to take a 1,500 square foot home and chop it into 2 apartments, and maybe even get a bonus apartment out of it, it sounds like it would be, a win for the investor at the very least.
Well, you're creating an incentive for this kind of conversion to happen then.
Right.
And Wall Street has already found single family purchases to be quite profitable as well. So imagine on top of that, like you said, Desmond, taking it and being able to make multiple units out of one.
The other thing that I think we have to bear in mind is the city has invested millions of dollars in promoting home ownership throughout Baltimore in neighborhoods. That's what Live Baltimore is all about. Promoting home ownership. The city has tax incentives. They have financing incentives, all with the purpose of promoting home ownership. Why is that? Because we've seen that home ownership creates neighborhood stability, creates family stability, creates stability in public education. Kids that live in a neighborhood and are homeowners tend to stay in the same schools for longer periods of time. The average length of a tenancy in a rental unit is about 2.5 to 3 years.
Right.
The average length of tenancy in an owner-occupied unit is 10 years plus.
Right.
So all of those factors are the reasons that the city has invested a lot of money and effort in trying to promote home ownership. And this really is just counter to that whole initiative that's been going on for 3 decades now in terms of trying to preserve home ownership.
Right.
And I would like to add, if I may as well, just 2 things. In addition, the bill's main sponsor has stated that the purpose of this bill is to undo racism that has been exacerbated by zoning laws since, zoning laws were created. And zoning laws at this point of time currently are really just to be about place and space, like, modifying and enforcing use of parcels of land. And so we don't really see how it's going to undo racism in as far as housing discrimination is concerned. And then in addition, this particular bill, if it were to become law, would really move the goalposts for African Americans who still make up a vast majority in this city. Home ownership creates so much opportunity to be able to build intergenerational wealth. It's the number one factor from my understanding as well. And
right.
It's just common knowledge That's the number one factor for building intergenerational wealth. So if you are to say, basically, I'm going to advocate for something, and we're not opposed to renters. Like, let's make that totally clear. I have worked many years of multifamily housing on the federal government side of things and still continue to as well. And I will always advocate for renters. And I will always advocate for renters to have a place and a home in my community as well. But I also understand that not every single renter will remain a renter. And so there needs to be opportunities for those renters to be able to graduate into home ownership or return to home ownership. And if you're looking at this bill and you're looking at it from a perspective of building intergenerational wealth and getting rid of that gap between African Americans and whites in this country, or in this city in particular, we're looking at this city. This bill does not, I don't see how this bill helps that. I see
Right.
where the bill were to hurt that, because you're taking additional homes off the market and people aren't able to build intergenerational wealth. And in
Right.
addition, in my neighborhood, what I've observed, and my neighborhood is relatively small, households, I believe, is when a house comes up on the market, which there's not a lot of housing that comes up on the market because it is so small. But
Not
when a
single
house
family.
does, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I said not a lot of single family houses coming to market. Yeah.
Yeah, because there's just not a lot of inventory and people
Mhm.
are staying put for a whole host of reasons. But, if a house comes up and say it's, a reasonable price house, sometimes that house gets bidded up because of investors. If a house is foreclosed upon and someone can purchase that house through the HUD home store, for instance, due to the foreclosure process. Sometimes I believe I've observed that I don't believe that that house initially is being truly offered to the public to become home homeowner occupied. That it's being snatched up initially within a certain redemption a period of time by investors, and that shouldn't be happening. And that's
Right.
because, like, our communities are desirable. We have a lot to offer, and we will have more to offer. And
Yeah.
so, if investors are already skirting around rules currently in existence, then what are they going to do when the rules are bent into their favor?
Yeah. And I
Absolutely.
think her point, Denisha's point is really an important one. Yeah, I don't think we're opposed to renters, but I do have to say, I would prefer to have two homeowners living next door to me than two absentee landlords.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just a fact, because absentee landlords are just not as conscientious about maintaining their properties as homeowners are. The other thing is, you don't want to cannibalize your existing resource and stock of owner occupied single family dwellings to create rental units. You want to create rental units, yes, but not by cannibalizing single family dwellings that
Right.
offer home ownership opportunities to people.
Yeah, and that was the concern that was raised for me, because when I think about it, and I go around the city and I look at what is being developed, I don't see a whole lot of new single family homes being developed, but I do see a lot of multifamily dwellings and mixed use development going on around the city, and to like you said, to further cannibalize the single family home market, with speculative investors who are not going to occupy those homes, and because they're not present in the community, they're not as invested in the community. They're invested in their profit, their net profit, right? So they're going to do the least amount of upkeep and maintenance and beautification that's required, just to attract a renter. And yeah, I can see where that would be counter to the mission of the Live Baltimore project. So,
And in addition, I would like to add that the bill sponsor, excuse me, has stated that a Live Baltimore study has found that there are so many people willing to move back into or move to Baltimore City right away, but housing is an obstacle. But when you also look further into that Live Baltimore study, it says that people want a diversity of different types of housing style other than the traditionally well-known Baltimore row home. And
Mm-hmm.
one of the reasons I moved into my house in particular is because of the different style of house that it was. It's a single family detached house with a front yard, 2 side yards, and a nice big backyard.
Mm-hmm.
And so, let's not cherry pick the Live Baltimore study here to justify this bill, especially when Live Baltimore does so much good work to welcome people back into the city.
Right, and if you're cherry picking neighborhoods around where this could happen, I mean, that would just further exacerbate the problem or this issue in the areas where it would be able to happen.
I have a question that has to do with that, because I've seen a lot about how this is supposed to address the legacy of segregation. I don't see how it can do that when it can't trump, when this bill can't trump existing covenants. So was it a choice for the provisions of this bill to not trump existing covenants like in Guilford or Roland Park? Or are laws like these that make changes to zoning, are they unable to trump neighborhood covenants? Or was this a choice to exempt the
certain neighborhoods?
Yeah, certain neighborhoods.
Yeah, because it would have ended up in litigation. I don't think you can pass a law unless there's, some provisions that are in private covenants have been declared unenforceable.
Yeah.
Because the courts have decided they're unenforceable. And if laws like segregation, religion, race, ethnicity, but the sponsor of the bill intentionally avoided making it applicable to all neighborhoods because they knew it would end up in a defeat of the bill because it would be unenforceable in those neighborhoods.
Okay. Great question. And so it was a choice to not challenge the covenants.
Right.
Right. Okay. I just think I don't understand how he can still say that this is addressing the legacy of segregation, because it's possible it could even reinforce it, because it's only going to open up this is only going to apply in, it's not going to apply to the rich white neighborhood, rich white neighborhoods.
You're identifying the neighborhoods. I was going to say, we'll do some research to find out what neighborhoods have covenants that the bill sponsor chose not to.
The rich white ones.
Well, they're Roland Park, Homeland, Guilford, to the central corridor of the city. Right. Here's another factor that I think really important to look at. The fact is, all of our neighborhoods already have rental units. There's over the past 50 to 75 years, right, there have been conversions of these dwellings. But in 1972, when the zoning ordinance passed, they decided to put the brakes on those types of conversions again, in order to keep densities down and preserve home ownership opportunities. But I have some data here from census. For example, in Beachfield, 10 Hills, 75% home ownership occupancy right now. Well, that means 25% of the units are rental units. Hamilton, 73% home ownership. Howard Park, West Arlington, on the west side, 68% home ownership. So you're really talking about neighborhood.
Can I dive in there real quick? Jody, are you saying 68% owner-occupied home ownership?
Owner-occupied units.
Okay, yeah. Owner-occupied. Right. Okay.
Owner-occupied. This is from the most recent census. Ashburton area, 63%. So there are rental units in these places. The question from a policy standpoint is, do we want to, as this bill would do, make it easier? As a matter of fact, not just easier, make it a matter of right to be able to convert any unit that's more than 1,500 feet.
Sure. I mean, you could see those numbers flip. I mean, you could see there'd be 30%, 35% owner occupied in Ashburton, and a lot more renters. And like you said, no one is, it's not to throw shade at renting, but as I alluded to earlier in the
I'm glad, because I rent.
but you're in a multifamily building. So but the point is that when they design the neighborhoods, they've already priced that in. They've already said it's 68% owner occupied homes in Ashburn, because it's probably pretty close to what they designed it to be, right? And so to introduce something like this that could possibly flip that number and make it 65% rentals would I don't know. Yeah, I think it would change the algorithm there. And as you said, when you have 2.5 years of average residency, a lot. I mean, that's going to trickle down to what happens with schools, and we already have an enrollment issue. That we're dealing a serious enrollment issue that we're dealing with here in our public schools, and we're looking for more families, to throw down roots here and send their kids to school and try to reverse that trend. And I haven't heard anything that where this bill would be any help for doing those types of things. So
yeah, and one of the other things for the city, and I know this well, having been involved in real estate for many years, what's the old adage? It's location, location, location is what goes into creating value in real estate. Well, Canton has some very, very high-priced houses, and there are a lot of people clamoring to move to Canton. But not everybody wants to live in a row home in a very dense area where parking is difficult. Some people want to have the opportunity to move to a house that has a little bit of green space around it and isn't so dense. So it's diversity in terms of population, but it's also diversity in terms of choice of housing types and neighborhood types. That's really going to help preserve a dynamic housing market in Baltimore City.
Right. And I mean, and there's what I've seen is a traditional progression, as you come here and you're, young and you're working and you don't have a lot of obligations. You just want to be close to the action. You kind of start off in those areas. And then, as you start to have more obligations and your the number of times you need to go to the park because you've had your second child and things like that, you tend to want to move to those corners of Baltimore City that have, a little bit more green space and a little bit more square footage and things of that nature. So to, like you said, to cannibalize that stock of residences, I mean, where would those people go once they're done living downtown and, are not drinking till 2 a.m. every night?
Yeah. Well, and I mentioned in my little intro that I'm a lifelong resident. So I've lived in this same neighborhood for 70 years. And in that period of time, when I was growing up, this neighborhood was predominantly white, like I'm going to say 90% white. And we all went, there were 5 Catholic grade schools in this neighborhood. None of them are open now.
Wow.
The neighborhood has gone from being 90% white to about 35% white. But what's been true in this neighborhood is it's always maintained high levels of home ownership. So my neighbors that have moved in, that I've seen, that I've witnessed this over the 70 years I've been here, we have great neighbors, and they come in all colors now. And it's been a wonderful area to attract homeowners, people like Tanisha and others. But if we would pass this bill, I fear what we're doing is we're taking away that opportunity for people to put roots down, to make an investment, to build some household wealth. And that's why I think the bill is very misguided. And by the way, we've been talking about the bill. The bill is actually number 22-0285. So if your listeners out there would like to send a letter in, we would very much appreciate having as many people as possible to send letters in, letting their council people know that they have some concerns about this bill. Tanisha and I have been going around to neighborhood associations around the city to bring this message forth, because a lot of people don't know about it. It hasn't been scheduled for a hearing. We're hoping it never gets scheduled for a hearing, but we're taking the time to go and make people aware of what the unintended consequences of this bill could be.
Right. And I'd love to, and thank you for coming by City Voters Live podcast and sharing this this incredible information about this bill. And did we get the number of that bill? You said
22-0285.
0285. And I do think it's very important that people are aware that this is something, even though it doesn't look like it has moved much, in the council, and it probably doesn't deserve to. There's some some other interesting things I think that we took down in some notes about some of the other provisions of the bill. I know, I live in the Northwest side of town, and like you said, it's I don't know what the number is as far as owner occupied for this neighborhood. It's probably somewhere comparable to Ted Hills, which you mentioned earlier.
Mm-hmm.
But interspersed between a lot of the single family homes are homes that were, I guess, at one point converted. I know that was a big thing back in during the war effort. But we do have the ability for folks to rent and live within the same community as the homeowners here. And I just couldn't. I think it would be unfathomable for me to wake up tomorrow and someone from some other state has bought the house next to me and is chopping it up into five apartments because there's a bus stop right here on in front of my house. Mm-hmm. And then from what I'm reading, wouldn't even have to. I know the house. Every dwelling that's been chopped up has to provide for off-street parking. So they're all the houses that currently have been modified for multifamily have dedicated parking on the property. And it looks like one of the things that I've read here is that that's something that wouldn't be required.
Right. This bill actually eliminates that requirement. It removes the requirement to have any off-street parking offset. So you could take a building, a structure, a single-family dwelling, create 3 dwelling units in it, and there'll be no off-street parking requirement.
Wow.
And one of the things that this bill sponsor says is like, well, currently right now, if multiple people are living together in a home, a large family, they could all have multiple cars, each and every single one of them, and park wherever. But there are concerns to be had about off-street parking requirements. I mean, I personally do think that maybe we do need to rethink the requirements to a degree, just because I do think that sometimes it can be a bit stringent and a bit of an obstacle for building new housing. That's just my personal opinion, though. Mm-hmm. And Jody, correct me, because I'm not going to remember the title, but of this, but it's like a parking pass authority wrote a really interesting letter. I feel like, if you're very much invested in this issue or care about, I forget what they're called offhand, like certain requirements that go into building housing, this parking pass authority, or
it's the advisory group, yes, for the residential parking permit, parking permit advisory group.
Yeah. And they talk about things, and it brought me back, and I had to say, okay, I need to take a step back here and think more coherently about these issues, because they talk about safety amongst other matters, and we've had and I'm not trying to get people to be fearful, but we've had disputes in our communities about parking here in the Northeast that have led to fatalities, unfortunately.
Right. Yeah, I think
so something that I'm sorry, Desmond, I apologize.
No, I was saying, I think I can recall an incident that started with an argument over a parking space that escalated. Right.
Yeah. Right. Two that I'm aware of, but multiple people have been injured or killed in those 2 incidents. But we can't stick our head in the sand about those concerns either. and say, we can't put cars before people, or whatever statements that are being made by the bill sponsor, to not adequately address people's really real concerns.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it doesn't recognize when we were growing up, I'm sure you all have seen this, my family had one car. Well, it's just my wife and I here now. We each have our own car.
Right.
And we have a family across the street from us. There are 4 of them now who are there, and they have 4 vehicles.
Right.
It's 2 children and 2 adults, and they have 4 vehicles in that house. So if you take a house and convert it to multifamily, and let's say you have 3 couples living there.
Yeah.
You're going to, quadruple the number of vehicles
without any requirement for them to be given any consideration for off-street parking. It's just it's absurd, and obviously there's it sounds like the bill sponsor has more in mind for cars than just trying to create housing. But
is that really relevant? To the bill at hand. I mean, is it fair?
Not if your purpose is genuine, but
right to use a zoning bill to address car policy.
Unbelievable. Well, I'll tell you what, the abundant housing bill, like I said, it's sitting in committee at this point. But we have, covered it substantially tonight. What we'll do is we'll work with you guys to on this for this episode in Baltimore City Voters, the Facebook group. We'll we'll grab as much information that you guys have about the bill. We'll put it and keep it with this episode on BCV. That way, anyone that has any interest in learning, any more about the bill, and they'll have access to it, through Baltimore City Voters. If anything further we want to discuss about this bill, you're welcome back to come and join us on City Voters Live podcast at any time. And we'll implore folks to contact their local representatives and give them their opinion about bill number 22-0285 as well.
Desmond, I just want to give a shout out. I think it's wonderful that Baltimore City Voters and you and Lauren are providing a forum to present this kind of information to people. I mean, it's difficult cutting through all of the clutter, and none of the mainstream media folks have picked up on this and it can do the kind of deep dive that you can do in having a short discussion like this for 40 minutes or so. So I really appreciate the fact that you've taken an interest in this and other issues that are going to affect Baltimore City residents.
Thank you so much. I'd really appreciate that praise, and this is what we do. This is why we're here. This is why we volunteer, is to put as much information as we possibly can in the hands of the voters of Baltimore City, and give them a place where they a library where they can go back and this will be memorialized in a nice little episode. And as I said, all the bill text and any notes that we have from things that I think that residency, that homeowner occupancy information that you brought up earlier is just fantastic information to have, coupled with the information that you guys provided, and I'm glad that you have appreciation for what we're trying to do. That certainly is high praise, and we certainly appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you, and we certainly appreciate you guys joining. Thank you so much. I look forward to seeing you soon.
All right.
Good night.
Off. Thanks.
Right.
Good night.
Wow. The abundant housing bill. Do you have some follow up that you were?
Well, I mean, it's on the same subject, but I'm looking at a banner, an article from the Baltimore Banner from over a year ago, I guess, when this was introduced, September 2022.
Right.
Someone from a woman named Adria Crutchfield, the executive director of the Baltimore Regional Housing Partnership, said the bill would potentially bring about a much needed rental stock. Okay, would potentially bring about a much needed rental housing stock in quality neighborhoods that have over time intentionally wanted to exclude certain people from their neighborhoods. Well, no, this won't bring any rental stock in those neighborhoods because all of those neighborhoods have protective covenants. So how can you say that?
Right.
So that's not true.
it just, I'm sorry. That's the funniest thing that I've ever heard, because if they're talking about, she's specifically talking about the neighborhoods who the bill sponsor
have tried to exclude certain people.
Yeah.
I mean,
and I didn't want to call out our guest, but the bill sponsor is Ryan Dorsey, councilman of District 3, and as we all know, he always has some really good ideas. But he did not want to take on. He chose not to take on the exact neighborhoods that this person is referencing.
So, maybe it would have been a losing battle, but then don't say that this addresses the legacy of segregation. It would have been a genuine
fight, right?
Because it doesn't. So, you can't say that it's not going to.
Right.
Sorry, that bugs me. And that quote, I just don't understand. No.
Well, that's what happens is you have a journalist that doesn't do their homework and is not doing the deep dive. And one thing, and I'll accept that praise that Jody gave us for what we're doing here, and that is to take the deep dive and to look at all aspects of these pieces of legislation, which I understand. Writers have deadlines and they've got a job that they got to do every day, and this is not certainly to poke at the media. But we want to pick up where they can't, right?
Yeah.
And that's an obvious hole, because that particular journalist probably either was not made aware.
Well, he later mentions the stuff about the covenants, but he doesn't link that. There's a section of this article about the legacy of segregation. He doesn't make the link this is going to prevent what I just talked about.
Got
because
it.
I don't know.
Okay, well, I'll stop trying to defend the journalists then. They may we don't know their intention.
Maybe they expect us to make the connection.
They didn't connect those dots right there. But
why would you even have that quote? Sorry,
no, it's a good find. I think that's a good nugget, and that's why we do what we're doing, right? And that's an amazing find on your end. Good job.
Wow.
Well, the Abundant Housing Act. And for all those who may want to understand a little bit more why street parking, the requirement that's for multifamilies to offer street parking, here's a good look at why that may have been excluded from the Abundant Housing Bill. He literally thinks
he might have some strong views on street parking.
I don't think he's mincing words there, right? Well, feel free to consume Baltimore City Abundant Housing Bill covered, episode 13, City Voters Live podcast. Thank you so much for joining us tonight, Lauren. Amazing work on this on this piece of legislation for us.
Thank you very much, Phil. Thank you for helping to put it together.
Excellent. All right. Until next time. Be safe, Baltimore.
Stay warm, everyone.
Yeah, get some milk.